Welcome to Reflections on the Masculine Journey with Raith. I'm Raith, and this is where we talk about wisdom, discipline, purpose, honor, and becoming the kind of man life requires. Today's episode is the first in the Masculine Journey Reflection series, and I want to begin with a simple question. Why did I write Manhood 101? Not just why I wrote a book, not just why I put words on paper, but why did I feel the need to talk about manhood at all? Because I believe we are living in a time where many men are confused, angry, distracted, isolated, and uncertain about who they are supposed to become. Some men have never had a proper model of manhood. Some had fathers who were absent. Some had fathers who were present physically but absent emotionally. Some men had strong examples but never had the lessons explained. And some men have lived long enough to know that being male and becoming a man are not the same thing. That is where Manhood 101 begins. It is not written as a lecture from a perfect man. It is not written as a rule book from someone who has never failed. It is written as a conversation, a reflection, a guide for men who are trying to understand themselves, correct themselves, strengthen themselves, and live with greater purpose. Because a man is not simply born, a man is built. Why manhood needs to be discussed. We live in a culture that talks constantly about identity, success, freedom, and personal choice, but we do not talk enough about responsibility. And manhood without responsibility becomes nothing more than appetite. A man can chase money, he can chase women, he can chase status, he can chase comfort. But if he does not develop character, eventually everything he builds will rest on weak ground. That is one of the reasons I wrote Manhood 101. I wanted to bring the conversation back to the basics. What does it mean to be reliable? What does it mean to be disciplined? What does it mean to control emotion without denying emotion? What does it mean to speak truth when lying would be easier? What does it mean to protect, provide, lead, serve, build, and endure? These are old questions. They are not new, but every generation of men must answer them again. The world changes, technology changes, relationships change, work changes, politics change, culture changes. But the core requirements of manhood do not change as much as people think. A man still needs courage. A man still needs discipline. A man still needs wisdom. A man still needs self-control. A man still needs purpose. A man still needs honor. And perhaps most importantly, a man still needs to know himself. My own background and why this matters to me. I did not come to these ideas from theory alone. My life has forced me to think about strength, pain, responsibility, loss, discipline, and endurance. I have been a soldier. I have been a police officer. I have been a teacher. I have been a husband, a father, and a man who has had to rebuild after loss. Each of those roles taught me something different about manhood. The military taught me that discipline is not a slogan. It is what you do when you are tired, afraid, uncomfortable, or under pressure. Police work taught me that strength without control is dangerous. A man must be able to act, but he must also be able to restrain himself. Teaching taught me that influence is not just about what you know, it is about whether people believe you care enough to tell them the truth. Marriage, fatherhood, grief, and life itself taught me that a man cannot escape pain. He can only decide what pain will make of him. Will it make him bitter? Will it make him cruel? Will it make him passive? Or will it make him deeper, wiser, and more useful? That question sits behind much of my writing. I am not interested in shallow manhood. I am not interested in pretending that masculinity is only muscles, money, aggression, or dominance. Those things may get attention, but they do not build a complete man. A complete man must have inner structure. He must know what he stands for. He must know what he will not do. He must know what kind of man he is trying to become. That is why I wrote Manhood 101. Manhood is a journey, not a costume. One of the mistakes men make is thinking manhood is something they can put on from the outside. They think if they dress a certain way, drive a certain vehicle, make a certain amount of money, lift enough weight, or speak with enough confidence, then they have arrived. But manhood is not a costume. It is not a performance. It is not a social media image. Manhood is a journey of formation. It is built through decisions, habits, failures, corrections, and repeated acts of responsibility. A boy often asks, "What do I want?" A man must learn to ask, "What is required of me?" That shift changes everything. When a man begins asking what is required of him, he starts to move differently. He thinks before he reacts. He considers consequences. He becomes more careful with his words. He becomes more intentional with his time. He stops blaming everyone else for where he is. He learns to face himself honestly. That is why reflection matters. This podcast is called Reflections on the Masculine Journey for a reason. Reflection is not weakness. Reflection is how a man studies his own life. A man who never reflects repeats the same mistakes and calls them personality. A man who reflects can look at his actions, his habits, his anger, his fear, his desires, and his failures and ask, "Is this building the man I want to become?" That is a powerful question, and many men avoid it because it requires honesty. But honesty is where manhood begins. The problem with modern confusion. Part of the reason Manhood 101 matters is because many men are receiving mixed messages. Some are told masculinity is toxic. Some are told masculinity means dominating everyone around them. Some are told to suppress everything. Some are told to express everything. Some are told to be soft. Some are told to be hard. Some are told to lead. Some are told leadership itself is oppressive. So the modern man can become trapped between two false extremes. On one side is the passive man who avoids responsibility, avoids conflict, avoids commitment, and lets life happen to him. On the other side is the reckless man who mistakes anger for strength, control for leadership, and ego for confidence. Neither one is the answer. The answer is not passivity. The answer is not brutality. The answer is disciplined strength. A man should be strong enough to protect, but controlled enough not to abuse power. He should be honest enough to speak truth, but wise enough not to be cruel. He should be emotional enough to love deeply, but disciplined enough not to be ruled by every feeling. He should be ambitious enough to build, but grounded enough not to lose his soul in the chase. That balance is hard. That is why it must be taught, practiced, and reflected on. What Manhood 101 is really about. At its core, Manhood 101 is about returning to the foundations. It is a conversational exploration of the masculine journey. That matters because men do not just need information, they need formation. Information tells you what something is. Formation shapes who you become. A man can read 1,000 quotes about discipline and still live an undisciplined life. A man can talk about honor and still lie when it benefits him. A man can say family matters and still give his best energy to strangers and his leftovers to the people at home. That is why the real question is not, what do you believe? The real question is, what do your actions prove that you believe? That is where the masculine journey becomes serious. Because eventually, a man must stop hiding behind intentions. He must look at results. He must look at patterns. He must look at the condition of his body, his mind, his relationships, his work, his finances, his faith, his habits, and his word. Not to shame himself, but to tell the truth. A man cannot repair what he refuses to inspect. That is why Manhood 101 is not just about ideas. It is about self-examination. It asks a man to look inward and then act outward. Reflect, correct, build, repeat. The values behind the book. Several values run through this work. The first is truth. A man must be willing to tell the truth, especially to himself. Self-deception is one of the most dangerous forms of weakness because it allows a man to remain comfortable while his life falls apart. The second is discipline. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline is the structure that makes freedom possible. Without discipline, a man becomes a servant to impulse. The third is honor. Honor is what keeps a man aligned when nobody is watching. It is the inner agreement between his values and his behavior. The fourth is responsibility. Responsibility is where boyhood ends and manhood begins. A man accepts that his choices matter and that his life affects others. The fifth is wisdom. Wisdom is not just knowing facts. Wisdom is knowing how to live. It is the ability to see consequences before they arrive. The sixth is purpose. A man without purpose is easily distracted. He becomes available to every temptation, every resentment, and every false identity. Purpose gives direction to masculine energy. These values are not decorative words. They are building materials. When a man builds with truth, discipline, honor, responsibility, wisdom, and purpose, he becomes more stable. He becomes more reliable. He becomes more dangerous to chaos and more useful to those he loves. Who this book is for? Manhood 101 is for the young man who is trying to figure out what kind of man he should become. It is for the older man who realizes he still has work to do. It is for the father who wants better language to teach his son. It is for the man who has made mistakes and wants to rebuild. It is for the man who is tired of drifting. It is for the man who knows he has strength inside him but has not yet disciplined that strength into purpose. It is also for the man who has been through pain, because pain is often where men either break down or wake up. Some men go through hardship and use it as an excuse to become bitter. Other men go through hardship and allow it to sharpen their understanding. I am speaking to the second man, the man who wants to become better, the man who wants to take what happened to him and turn it into wisdom, the man who wants to stand straighter, think clearer, love better, lead stronger, and live with greater honor. That man is on the masculine journey. Why I started this podcast and YouTube series. This episode is not only about the book, it is also about why I'm starting this series. Books are powerful, but some conversations need a voice. Some men will read the book first. Others may find the video first. Others may listen while driving, walking, working, or thinking through their own life. That is why Reflections on the Masculine Journey with Raith exists. This is a place to slow down and ask better questions. What kind of man am I becoming? What have I allowed to weaken me? What habits are shaping my life? What values do I claim and do I actually live them? Where have I confused anger with strength? Where have I confused comfort with peace? Where have I avoided responsibility? Where do I need to rebuild? These are not always easy questions, but they are necessary questions, because a man who never questions himself may become very confident in the wrong direction. Reflection gives a man the chance to adjust his course before life forces a correction. The main lesson of episode 1. The main lesson I want to leave you with today is this. Manhood is not automatic. It must be chosen, built, tested, and refined. Age alone does not make a man wise. Strength alone does not make a man honorable. Pain alone does not make a man deep. Experience alone does not make a man mature. A man becomes mature when he reflects on his experience, learns from his pain, disciplines his strength, and takes responsibility for his life. That is the foundation of Manhood 101, and that is the foundation of this series. We are not here to complain about the world. We are not here to blame women, culture, politics, parents, bosses, or society for everything. There may be real problems in the world. There may be real unfairness. There may be real confusion. But a man's first duty is to examine what is within his control. His word, his habits, his attitude, his work, his body, his mind, his reactions, his relationships, his mission, his discipline. That is where the masculine journey begins, not with blaming, with building, the call to action. So, as we close this first episode of Masculine Journey Reflections, I want to give you one simple exercise. Take out a notebook or open a note on your phone and answer this question. What kind of man am I currently becoming based on my daily habits? Not based on your dreams, not based on your intentions, not based on the image you present to others, based on your habits. What do your habits say about your direction? Then ask yourself a second question. What is one thing I can correct this week? Do not pick 10 things. Pick one habit, one conversation, one responsibility, one act of discipline, one truth you need to face, one correction you need to make. That is how a man begins to rebuild. Not through fantasy, through action. Small, honest, repeated action. In closing, this has been Masculine Journey Reflections #1, why I wrote Manhood 101. I'm Raith, and this is Reflections on the Masculine Journey with Raith. If this message speaks to you, subscribe to the channel, follow the podcast, and share it with another man who is trying to become stronger, wiser, and more purposeful. And leave a comment with this answer. What does manhood mean to you? In the next episode, we will continue the journey by asking another important question. What are modern men missing? Until then, remember, a man is not born complete. He is built through truth, discipline, honor, responsibility, wisdom, and purpose. I'll see you next time on Reflections on the Masculine Journey with Raith.